The fluorescent lights of LaGuardia Airport flickered above me as I checked my phone for the third time. 10:47 p.m. The conference had ended a day early due to a snowstorm heading toward Chicago, and I'd managed to catch the last flight back to New York. As I sat in the taxi, watching the familiar streets of our neighborhood come into view, I felt a strange excitement. Sarah wasn't expecting me until tomorrow night. Maybe I could surprise her with breakfast in bed, the way we used to do when we were first married. The house was dark except for a faint glow from our bedroom window upstairs. I paid the driver and grabbed my suitcase, treading quietly up the front steps. The key turned silently in the lock. I'd oiled it just last month. As I stepped into the foyer, I heard her voice drifting down from upstairs. She was on the phone, her tone animated and bright in a way I hadn't heard in months. I smiled, thinking maybe she was talking to her sister Emily. But as I moved toward the stairs, her words stopped me cold. "God, I can't wait until this is all over," Sarah said, laughing. "No, seriously, Mark. 3 more months and the house refinancing will be final. Then I can file and we can finally be together without all this sneaking around." My hand gripped the banister. Mark Henderson, my business partner. My friend of 15 years. "I know, baby, I know," she continued, her voice saccharine sweet. "Yes, he's completely clueless. You should see him. Comes home from these trips all excited, bringing me those stupid gifts like we're still newlyweds. Last week it was a snow globe from Denver. A snow globe. Like I'm 12 years old. The laugh that followed was cruel, unfamiliar. This wasn't the woman I'd married 8 years ago. Or maybe it was, and I'd just been too blind to see it. The best part? She went on. He actually thinks we're trying for a baby. Can you imagine? I've been on birth control this entire time. I just let him think we're having trouble conceiving. He's even suggested we see a fertility specialist. The idiot is ready to spend thousands on tests when there's nothing wrong. I just don't want his child. My vision blurred. We'd been trying for 2 years. 2 years of her tears, her disappointment, her assurances that we'd get through this together. 2 years of me blaming myself, wondering if the stress from work had somehow affected my fertility. I'd even stopped drinking coffee because some article suggested it might help. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and opened the voice recorder app. Evidence. I needed evidence. What about the business? Mark's voice came through faintly on speaker. How much is his share worth? The accountant said around $2 million, give or take, Sarah replied. And with the house equity, I'm looking at close to $3 million total. Not bad for 8 years of playing the devoted wife, right? My lawyer says in New York, I'll get at least half of everything, maybe more if we can prove he was neglectful. Which won't be hard with all those business trips. You're brilliant, babe, Mark said. What's he doing this week? Chicago until tomorrow night. Some tech conference. Honestly, I tune out when he talks about work. It's all so boring. He's boring. You know what he did for our anniversary last month? He recreated our first date. Took me to the same Italian restaurant. Ordered the same wine, even wore a similar shirt. It was pathetic. Meanwhile, you and I were in the Hamptons the week before, and that was more romance than I've felt in years. I recorded for another 10 minutes as she detailed her plans, laughed about my shortcomings, and made plans to meet Mark tomorrow after his racquetball game. A standing Wednesday appointment he'd mentioned countless times. They'd been using our shared calendar, our routines, our trust as a cover. When she finally said goodbye and hung up, I stood in the darkness of my own home, a stranger in my own life. The recording sat heavy on my phone. 23 minutes of betrayal captured in digital perfection. My wife, the woman I'd loved since college, the one I'd built a life with, had reduced our marriage to a financial transaction and a countdown to freedom. I quietly backed out of the house, pulled my suitcase down the steps, and walked 3 blocks to the Marriott. In room 412, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the recording twice more, making sure every word was clear. Then I opened my laptop and began making a list. By sunrise, I knew exactly what needed to be done. The hotel room became my command center. I called my secretary at 7 a.m., voice steady despite running on no sleep, and told her I was extending the Chicago trip through Friday. Then I called Sarah, who answered on the 3rd ring, voice still thick with sleep. Hey, honey, I said, injecting warmth into my tone. Sorry for calling early. The conference got extended. They've added a whole extra day of sessions. I won't be home until Friday night now. Oh. The relief in her voice was palpable. That's okay. These things happen. I'll miss you. Miss you too, I lied. Love you. Love you too. The words felt like ash in my mouth. I hung up and immediately called another number. Davidson Investigations, a gruff voice answered. 20 minutes later, I'd hired Richard Davidson, a former NYPD detective who specialized in marital infidelity cases. By noon, I was sitting in his office above a Korean grocery store in Queens, sliding an envelope across his cluttered desk. I need everything, I told him. Phone records, financial statements, photographs, timestamps. I need to know how long this has been going on, where they meet if there are others involved. I need documentation that will hold up in court. Richard, a stocky man in his 50s with careful eyes, listened to portions of the recording. His expression never changed, but he nodded slowly. How much does your business partner know about your finances? Everything. We started the company together. We have full transparency. At least I thought we did. Check your accounts, he said flatly. Both personal and business. People planning exits sometimes start siphoning money months in advance. My stomach dropped. I hadn't considered that. Back at the hotel, I logged into every account I had. Our joint checking showed normal activity, but something nagged at me. I called our bank. Mr. Chen, yes, I can help you, the customer service representative said cheerfully. You're calling about the transfer authorization? What transfer authorization? A pause. The one Mrs. Chen submitted last week. She requested authorization to transfer up to $50,000 from your joint savings to her personal account without secondary approval. Since she's a joint account holder, it just required your verbal consent, which she said you'd given. I never gave any consent. Another pause. Longer this time. I see. I'm going to transfer you to our fraud department. 2 hours later, I discovered that Sarah had been slowly moving money for 3 months. Nothing huge. $3,000 here, $5,000 there. Always just below the threshold that would trigger automatic notifications to me. She'd accumulated nearly $40,000 in an account I didn't know existed. But that wasn't the worst of it. When I logged into our business accounts, my hands went numb. Mark had been issuing himself bonuses, approved with my forged signature. The accountant whom I called immediately was confused. But you approved these, Jonathan. I have the emails. Forward them to me, now. The emails had come from my address, but I'd never sent them. Someone had accessed my email, probably Mark, using passwords I'd stupidly shared with him during our early days when we were scrambling to keep the business afloat. Over the past year, he'd embezzled nearly $200,000. That evening, Richard called. I've got a tail on both of them. Your wife met Mark at a condo in Tribeca this afternoon. They stayed for 2 hours. I've got photos, timestamps, everything. This place, it's leased under an LLC, but I did some digging. Your business partner's name is on the paperwork. He bought a love nest with stolen money from our company, I said, almost laughing at the audacity of it. There's more, Richard continued. This isn't his first affair. I found 2 other women he's been seeing over the past 3 years. One of them is married to a guy who works in your building, David Reese, the hedge fund manager on the 14th floor. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture far uglier than I'd imagined. Mark wasn't just betraying me with my wife. He was a serial cheater, a thief, and apparently had been systematically deceiving everyone around him. I called my lawyer next. Thomas Brennan had handled our business incorporation and was someone I trusted completely. After explaining the situation and playing him the recording, he was silent for a long moment. Jonathan, this is extensive. The adultery, the embezzlement, the fraud, we're looking at both civil and criminal cases here. But we need to be strategic. If we tip our hand too early, they'll hide assets, delete evidence, maybe even try to flip the narrative. What do you suggest? Let them think they're winning. Your investigator keeps gathering evidence. I'll start drawing up papers, divorce, business dissolution, criminal complaint. We'll coordinate everything to hit simultaneously. They won't know what's happening until it's too late to react. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I played the oblivious husband and trusting business partner. I came home Friday night as planned, hugged Sarah, told her about the conference. She smiled and kissed my cheek, asking if I wanted takeout from our favorite Thai place. We ate dinner together while she told me about her week, each word another lie. At work, I shook Mark's hand, laughed at his jokes, discussed our Q4 projections. He mentioned his racquetball game, complained about his serve, asked if I wanted to join him sometime. Maybe next week, I said, knowing there wouldn't be a next week. But in the shadows, the net was tightening. Richard's team documented 18 separate meetings between Sarah and Mark. The forensic accountant I'd hired found additional discrepancies. Mark had been padding expenses, creating fake vendor accounts, systematically looting our company while I'd been too trusting to notice. My lawyer assembled a file 3 inches thick. Bank records, photographs, email forensics, testimony from the accountant, phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between Sarah and Mark. The recording I'd made that first night was transcribed. Time-stamped, verified, when do we move? I asked Thomas during a late-night meeting. He smiled grimly. Your company's annual investor dinner is next Friday, right? The one where you announce major business decisions? Yes, we've got 50 people coming, investors, clients, employees. Perfect. Let's give them something to remember. The days crawled by with excruciating slowness. Every conversation with Sarah felt like walking through a minefield. Every meeting with Mark required me to suppress the rage simmering just below the surface. But I'd learned something about myself during those 2 weeks. I was capable of patience I never knew I possessed. Sarah had started being more affectionate, which almost made it worse. She'd initiate conversations about her day, snuggle up to me on the couch during our evening TV shows, even suggested we book a vacation to Turks and Caicos. Just the two of us, she said, running her fingers through my hair. We need to reconnect. I knew what it was, of course. The refinancing had gone through. The house, the one I'd bought before we married, the one that should have been solely mine, was now jointly owned thanks to papers I'd signed during what I thought was a romantic gesture on our 5th anniversary. Her lawyer had probably told her to play nice, to avoid any suspicion before filing for divorce. That sounds perfect, I told her, pulling up resort websites on my laptop while she leaned against my shoulder. How about February? After the busy season at work, she kissed my temple. You're so good to me, Jonathan. I don't say that enough. The words should have warmed me. Instead, they felt like ice water in my veins. At work, Mark had grown increasingly confident, almost cocky. During a partners' meeting about Q4 bonuses, he'd suggested we take larger distributions this year. We've had a great year, he argued. We should enjoy it. Maybe we both take an extra $100,000 each? Let's wait until after the investor dinner, I said calmly. I want to make sure we're maintaining adequate reserves. He'd shrugged, unconcerned. Why would he be worried? He'd already stolen twice that amount. Meanwhile, Richard's investigation had expanded in scope. The forensic analysis of Mark's computer, which our IT guy had accessed after I claimed to need files for an audit, revealed something stunning. Mark and Sarah had been planning this for over a year. There were spreadsheets detailing my assets, timelines for the divorce, even drafted messages to send to our clients to turn them against me once Mark had pushed me out of the company. They were going to destroy you, Richard said, spreading printouts across his desk. Not just take half and leave. They wanted everything. The company, the house, your reputation. There are emails here where they discuss spreading rumors about you being unstable, possibly having a drinking problem. I barely drink, I said, staring at the evidence. They didn't care about truth. They were building a narrative. Your wife was going to claim you were emotionally abusive, that she feared for her safety. Mark was ready to back her up, tell investors you'd become erratic and unreliable. They'd force you out, buy your shares at a depressed value, and you'd be left with nothing. The breathtaking cruelty of it stunned me into silence. This wasn't just an affair or even simple greed. This was a calculated assassination of everything I'd built, orchestrated by the 2 people I'd trusted most in the world. There's something else, Richard continued, sliding another folder toward me. The other woman I mentioned, the one married to David Reese. She filed for divorce 2 months ago. Her lawyer documented Mark's affair, and Reese is livid. I reached out to him. He wants revenge almost as much as you do. What are you suggesting? He's got connections at the SEC and knows people in financial journalism. If Mark's been embezzling from you, chances are he's playing fast and loose with other regulations. Reese is willing to make some calls, have some auditors look into your company. If we time it right, Mark will be dealing with federal investigators the same week you drop the divorce bomb on your wife. The plan was coming together with almost poetic symmetry. But there was one more piece I needed to handle personally. The Wednesday before the investor dinner, I took a long lunch and drove to Tribeca. The condo building was sleek and modern, all glass and steel. I waited in a coffee shop across the street, and at 1:47 p.m., Sarah's silver Mercedes pulled up to the valet. She stepped out wearing a dress I'd never seen, her hair freshly styled, smiling as Mark emerged from the lobby to greet her. He kissed her right there on the street, his hand on the small of her back, proprietary and confident. They laughed about something, then disappeared inside together. I took photos. Not because I needed more evidence, Richard's team had plenty, but because I needed to see it myself, to kill any remaining doubt or hope that this might somehow be a misunderstanding. They emerged 2 hours later, his tie loose, her lipstick smudged. She kissed him goodbye and drove off. He watched her go, then checked his phone and smiled before walking back inside. That night, Sarah came home humming. "Good day?" I asked. "Great day," she said, kissing my cheek. "Lunch with Emily, did some shopping, just enjoyed the weather. How about you?" "Oh, the usual. Productive meetings." She heated up leftover pasta while I set the table, and we ate dinner like a normal couple. She told me about a funny thing that happened at the grocery store. A completely fabricated story, I realized, since she'd been in Tribeca all afternoon. I smiled and laughed in the right places, playing my role. After dinner, I excused myself to the home office, claiming I needed to prepare for Friday's presentation. Instead, I reviewed the final details with Thomas over encrypted email. Everything was ready. The divorce papers, the business dissolution documents, the evidence packets for our investors, the criminal complaint ready to file with the DA's office. "You're sure about the timing?" Thomas wrote. "Once we start this, there's no going back." "I'm sure," I typed. Friday night. Let's end this. Thursday passed in a blur of final preparations. I rehearsed my speech, coordinated with our AV team for the presentation, confirmed attendance with our key investors. 53 people had RSVP'd yes. The venue, a private room at the River Club, was booked and decorated. The menu was set. Everything appeared normal for our annual celebration of success. That evening, Mark stopped by my office. "Big day tomorrow," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time we brought in a CFO. Someone to handle the day-to-day financial stuff so we can focus on growth." "Interesting idea," I said neutrally. I knew what this was. He wanted to install someone loyal to him, someone who'd help hide his theft. "I've actually got someone in mind," he continued. "My cousin graduated from Wharton last year, top of his class. I could reach out if you want." "Let's table it until next week," I said. "After we get through this dinner?" He shrugged. "Sure thing, partner." He clapped me on the shoulder. "We've built something great here, John, really great." "Yes," I agreed, meeting his eyes. "We certainly have." After he left, I sat in the darkness of my office for a long time, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Tomorrow I would burn it all down. My marriage, my business partnership, the comfortable life I'd built. But from those ashes, I'd rebuild something true, something that wasn't founded on lies and betrayal. My phone buzzed. Sarah. "Don't forget we're meeting Mark and his girlfriend at the dinner tomorrow." She's excited to finally meet everyone. His girlfriend. The audacity was almost admirable. He was bringing a decoy date to maintain appearances while sleeping with my wife. Looking forward to it, I texted back, one more day, one more performance. Then the truth would come crashing down on them both. Friday arrived with unseasonably warm weather for November, the kind of false spring that makes you forget winter is coming. I dressed carefully that morning, my best suit, the Patek Philippe watch my father had given me when we incorporated the company, the cufflinks Sarah had bought me for our first anniversary, back when her gifts had been chosen with love instead of obligation. Sarah was still in bed when I left. Her hair spread across the pillow, face peaceful in sleep. I stood in the doorway for a moment, saying goodbye to the woman I'd thought she was. Then I closed the door and walked out of our bedroom for the last time as her husband. The office was electric with pre-event energy. Our assistant had sent out the final reminders, the AV team was doing tech checks, and the catering company had confirmed delivery at the River Club by 6 p.m. Mark breezed in at 10, unusually dressed up, clearly excited for the evening. "Big announcement tonight?" he asked, coffee in hand. "The biggest," I confirmed. It wasn't a lie. At 4 p.m., I left the office and drove to meet Thomas at his firm's conference room. Richard was already there, along with David Reese, the hedge fund manager whose wife Mark had also betrayed. Reese was in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed with the controlled fury of a man who'd built empires and didn't appreciate being made a fool. "Mr. Chen," he said, shaking my hand, "I appreciate you letting me be part of this. Mark Henderson cost me my marriage. I've been waiting for the right moment to return the favor. Tonight we all get closure," I said. Thomas distributed folders to everyone. "Jonathan, here's your copy of everything. You'll need it for the presentation. David, these are the SEC complaint forms ready to file. They'll receive them electronically at 9 p.m., exactly when the dinner is scheduled to end. Richard, the additional evidence for the DA's office, we reviewed the plan one final time. At 7:30 p.m. during dessert, I would take the stage for my annual speech. Instead of the expected talk about Q4 results and future growth, I would present evidence of Mark's embezzlement and affair. The presentation would be projected on screens throughout the room. Photos, bank records, transcripts, all of it. Simultaneously, servers would deliver sealed envelopes to each attendee containing full documentation. The goal, Thomas explained, is to make sure the truth is witnessed by everyone who matters professionally before Mark can spin any narratives. Your investors, your clients, your employees, they'll all see the evidence with their own eyes. "What about Sarah?" I asked. "She'll receive divorce papers tonight, served by a process server who'll be waiting outside the River Club. The moment she leaves the building, he'll approach her. She'll know you know, but by then the professional damage to Mark will be done." At 6 p.m., I arrived at the River Club. The private room was perfect, elegant without being ostentatious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. Round tables were arranged theater-style, all facing a small stage with a podium. The projection screens were discreetly placed but large enough that every detail would be visible. Guests began arriving at 6:30. Our investors came first. The venture capital firms that had believed in us, the angel investors who'd taken early risks. Then our key clients, the ones who generated millions in annual revenue. Finally, our employees dressed up and excited for the annual celebration and bonus announcements. Sarah arrived at 7, stunning in a black dress I'd never seen. She kissed my cheek, her perfume familiar and foreign at once. "You look nervous," she whispered. "Don't be. You'll be great." "Thanks," I said, the word hollow. Mark came in 5 minutes later with a woman named Jessica, a paralegal from a firm we worked with, who clearly had no idea she was a prop in his performance. He worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, laughing too loud, playing the successful entrepreneur. At 7:15, our investors were all seated, wine flowing, appetizers circulating. I watched Mark lean over to Sarah's table and whisper something that made her smile. They were careful not to appear too familiar, but I could see the intimacy in the way they looked at each other. The secret language of people who'd shared a bed that afternoon. Dinner was served at 7:30. I barely tasted the food, my stomach in knots despite my outward calm. Around me, conversation flowed. Business deals, vacation plans, speculation about bonuses. Mark stood and clinked his glass, drawing attention. "Before Jonathan gives his annual address, I just want to say what a privilege it's been building this company together. 15 years of partnership and we're stronger than ever. To many more years of success." Everyone applauded. Sarah beamed at him from her table. I smiled and raised my glass, playing along one final time. At 8:05, the servers cleared dessert plates. The lights dimmed slightly. This was the scheduled time for my speech, the moment everyone expected me to review our successful year and announce bonuses. I walked to the podium, looking out at the faces of people I'd worked with, invested with, built relationships with over years. In the second row, Mark lounged confidently, Jessica beside him. 3 tables back, Sarah watched me with an expression I'd once thought was pride but now recognized as calculation. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady. "I know you're expecting the usual year-in review speech, and I promise we'll get to the numbers, but not the ones you're expecting." A ripple of confused laughter. Mark's smile tightened slightly. 15 years ago, Mark Henderson and I started this company with nothing but an idea and determination. We built it together, splitting everything 50-50, equal partners in every sense. I trusted him with my business, my reputation, and my livelihood. I paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. I also trusted him with my friendship. Mark has been to my home countless times. He knows my wife Sarah, who's here tonight. He's celebrated our anniversaries, commiserated about our struggles. He's been, I thought, like a brother to me. Sarah's expression had changed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. So you can imagine my surprise when I came home early from a business trip 2 weeks ago and overheard a phone conversation. I nodded to the AV tech. The first slide appeared on the screens, a screenshot of my phone's voice recorder, timestamp visible. I'm going to play you a portion of this recording. I want to apologize in advance to those of you who came here tonight expecting a celebration. What you're about to hear is uncomfortable, but it's important that the truth be witnessed by everyone who has a stake in this company. Mark was standing now, his face pale. John, what are you— Please sit down, Mark. My voice cut through the room like a blade. You'll have time to respond. I pressed play. Sarah's voice filled the room crystal clear through the sound system. God, I can't wait until this is all over. No, seriously, Mark. 3 more months and the house refinancing will be final. Then I can file and we can finally be together. The room had gone utterly silent. I watched Sarah's face drain of color as her own words condemned her. Mark had gone from pale to red, his hands gripping the edge of the table. The recording continued for 90 seconds, just the highlights. Her mockery of me, their plans, her lies about trying for a baby. When it ended, the silence was deafening. That's my wife, I said quietly, talking to my business partner about their affair and their plan to divorce me and take everything I've built. The room erupted. Investors were standing, demanding explanations. Employees stared in shock. Sarah had pushed back from her table, her chair clattering backward, her face a mask of horror and rage. Mark was yelling something, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. There's more, I said, and the room quieted again, everyone desperate to know how deep this betrayal went. The next slide appeared, bank statements highlighted in yellow, showing the transfers Mark had authorized with my forged signature. Over the past 14 months, my partner has embezzled $287,000 from this company. Money that belongs to all of us, our investors, our employees' profit-sharing pool, our operating reserves. More slides followed in rapid succession. The fake vendor accounts, the padded expenses, the condo lease in Tribeca, paid for with stolen money, photos of Mark and Sarah entering that building, timestamps matching days when he'd claimed to be at racquetball and she'd claimed to be having lunch with her sister. Our lead investor, Margaret Chen from Sequoia, stood up. Mr. Henderson, is this true? Mark was on his feet, his face twisted with fury. This is bullshit. John, you've lost your mind. That recording could be fake, those documents could be fabricated. Everything will be in your envelope, I interrupted, which is being distributed now. Servers moved through the room, placing thick manila envelopes at each seat. The room filled with the sound of tearing paper as investors and clients opened them, finding complete documentation, forensic accounting reports, private investigator findings, timestamps, phone records, everything. The district attorney's office will receive copies tonight, I continued. The SEC is being notified of financial irregularities requiring investigation. Our company's board of directors will receive a formal recommendation for immediate dissolution of the partnership agreement based on breach of fiduciary duty and moral turpitude clauses. Sarah suddenly lunged toward the stage, her face contorted. You bastard! You manipulative bastard! You think you can humiliate me like this? Security moved to intercept her, but I held up a hand. Let her speak. I think everyone should hear what she has to say. She stopped at the foot of the stage, chest heaving, makeup starting to run. The woman I'd loved looked like a stranger, all her masks finally stripped away. You were never enough, she spat. Never. You were boring and predictable and so goddamn trusting it made me sick. Yes, I slept with Mark. Yes, we planned to take everything from you, because you deserved it for being stupid enough to let us. The room gasped. Even in this moment, she couldn't see how completely she'd destroyed herself. She thought the truth was a weapon, not realizing she was only confirming everything I'd documented. Mark had gone quiet, slumped in his chair, Jessica staring at him in disgust. David Reese stood up from where he'd been sitting in the back. Mark, he called out, his voice carrying across the silent room. You remember my wife, Karen? The one you were sleeping with while you were planning this. She told me everything. The SEC complaint I filed this afternoon includes your insider trading. You gave her information about our company's acquisitions, which she used to buy stock. That's a federal crime. Mark's face went gray. The web of his lies was collapsing from every direction at once. Thomas stood from his seat near the door. "Mrs. Chen, there's someone outside who needs to speak with you regarding legal documents. If you'll excuse yourself." Sarah looked at me, finally understanding the full scope of what was happening. "You can't divorce me. I'll fight you on everything. I'll make your life hell. With what money?" I asked calmly. "The $40,000 you siphoned from our accounts has been frozen by court order. The house is in my name. The refinancing you pushed through was invalidated because you used forged documents. My lawyers found that yesterday. And your affair, your lies about trying for a baby, your plan to falsely claim abuse, all of that is documented. New York is a no-fault state, but fault still matters in asset division when fraud is involved." She stood there trembling with impotent rage, her entire plan unraveling. Finally, she turned and stalked toward the door. True to plan, a process server approached her the moment she exited the building. I turned back to the room, to the investors and employees and clients who'd watched this unfold. "I apologize for bringing you all here under false pretenses, but I needed witnesses. I needed people who understand business to see the evidence firsthand, so there could be no question about the truth. Mark Henderson is a thief and a fraud. He doesn't deserve this company, your investments, or your trust." Margaret Chen was reading through her envelope, her expression grim. "Mr. Chen, what are you proposing going forward?" "Dissolution of the partnership, effective immediately. Mark's shares will be forfeited based on the moral turpitude clause in our operating agreement. I've had 3 different law firms review it, and they all concur. I'm prepared to buy out any investors who want to exit. For those who stay, I'm bringing in a new CFO, implementing new controls, and I will spend the next year rebuilding the trust that's been broken." Another investor stood. "What about the missing money?" "Mark's assets are being seized as we speak. The condo, his car, his investment accounts, all purchased with stolen funds. I expect to recover most, if not all, of the embezzled money. Any shortfall I'll cover personally." The questions continued for another hour. Some investors were angry, some sympathetic, all of them shocked. But as they read through the documentation, as they saw the breadth and depth of Mark's deception, the consensus shifted. Margaret approached me as people started to leave. "This took courage," she said quietly, "and strategy. You handled this correctly. Maximum transparency, full documentation. I'm staying in. I think others will too." By 10 p.m., the room had cleared except for Thomas, Richard, and David Reese. Mark had been escorted out by security, his date having left separately, crying. My employees had clustered in confused groups before gradually departing, promising to come in Monday to discuss the future. "Well," Richard said, "that was something." "The DA's office confirmed they received everything," Thomas reported. "They're opening an investigation. Mark will be arrested for embezzlement within the week. As for Sarah, the divorce will be finalized in about 4 months given the evidence. She'll get nothing." David Reese shook my hand. "Thank you for letting me be part of this. The SEC investigation will destroy him professionally, even if he somehow avoids prison. He's done." After they all left, I stood alone in the empty room, looking out at the East River. The city lights reflected off the dark water, beautiful and indifferent. I felt hollowed out, exhausted, but also strangely liberated. My phone buzzed. An email from Margaret. "Emergency board meeting Monday 9 a.m. Proposal. Restructuring with you as sole principal. We believe in you, Jonathan. Tonight proved you're exactly the kind of leader we want." More emails followed over the next hour, clients expressing support, employees asking about the company's future, even a message from Mark's girlfriend, Jessica, apologizing for being unwittingly involved and offering to provide testimony about his behavior. At midnight, I drove back to the Marriott. I'd been living there for 2 weeks, though no one knew. The house felt contaminated now, full of lies and false memories. I'd put it on the market next week. In my hotel room, I poured a glass of scotch and sat by the window. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Chen? This is Detective Lisa Martinez with the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit. We got your evidence package. I'm calling to let you know that Mark Henderson has been taken into custody. He's being charged with embezzlement, wire fraud, and securities fraud. Given the dollar amounts involved, he's looking at serious prison time. Thank you for calling. Detective." "For what it's worth," she continued, "I've worked financial crimes for 12 years. The way you documented everything, The clarity of your evidence, you built an airtight case. Whatever happens, they can't wriggle out of this. After she hung up, I thought about Sarah, probably in our house right now, surrounded by the life we'd built, realizing it was all slipping away. I thought about Mark in a holding cell, his confidence finally shattered. I thought about the me from 2 weeks ago, blind and trusting, and I felt a strange grief for that version of myself who'd still believed in his marriage and his friendship. My phone buzzed again. Sarah. I almost didn't answer. What? I said finally. How could you? Her voice was raw, all pretense gone. How could you do this to me? How could I? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. Sarah, you planned to destroy my life. You lied for months, maybe years. You mocked me to your lover. You stole from me. And you're asking how I could expose the truth? I loved you once, she said quietly. It wasn't all fake. Maybe not at first, I admitted. But it became fake. And when it did, you should have had the courage to just leave. Instead, you chose cruelty and fraud. You chose to take a good man's trust and turn it into a weapon against him. What happens now? Now you get the consequences of your choices. I'll move forward. You and Mark will have to live with what you've done. I hung up and blocked her number. There was nothing left to say. 6 months later, I stood in the new office space we'd leased in Midtown. Smaller than before, but cleaner somehow. The company had survived. 8 of our 10 major investors had stayed, and we'd brought on new clients to replace the ones who'd left during the scandal. Mark was serving a 4-year sentence for embezzlement. Sarah had moved to California where her parents lived, trying to start over with nothing. The divorce was final. The house had sold. I'd bought a condo in Brooklyn with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Manhattan Bridge. Some nights I stood at those windows and thought about the husband I'd been, trusting to the point of foolishness, so invested in an ideal that I'd missed the reality crumbling around me. But mostly I thought about who I was becoming. Wiser, certainly. More cautious, inevitably. But also somehow more myself, no longer performing for someone who saw me as a mark rather than a partner. My assistant knocked on my office door. Mr. Chen, your 4 o'clock is here. Margaret Chen from Sequoia, who'd become an invaluable advisor in rebuilding the company. We were discussing expansion plans, new hires, the future. As I gathered my notes, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different. Older maybe, but also more solid somehow, like I'd finally grown into my own skin. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me. But in the end, it had done something else entirely. It had freed me from a life built on lies and given me the chance to build something true. I walked into the conference room, ready for whatever came next.